All right. We're back. It is COMP305 in the fall 2016 semester. We are week 12, part 1 of the broadcast. And what we're going to be talking about today is a couple things. One, some stuff that's due on Monday. Remember that your part 1 of your final project is due Monday. Remember that it's going to include things like your GDD, right? First draft of your GDD. Your first level should be there. Setting up your GitHub, that should be all done. And your basic project and your level 1 with a menu screen pretty much should be all finished and ready to go for Monday, right? So again, that's worth 10% of your final grade. Most of you have, that I saw from first part, are done that part, or well on their way to getting it done, which is a good thing. We're only going to be doing an hour of teaching today, so I'll try and keep it within an hour, approximately. And I want to be focused on one more feature that I want to add, I want to give you. And then finally next week, just to give you an idea of what we're doing next week, again, we'll do an hour of teaching. I'll probably focus on object pools next week, how to do object pools. And so just one feature again. And then we'll be right into the workshop again for next week. I'll also check your work to see how you're progressing. You should have level 2 and 3 done by next week with some finishing touches for the week after. I'm also going to be talking to you about your PowerPoint. I recommend you think about start putting your PowerPoints together for your final project even now, because if you do, then you're going to be ready to go. And if you look at your final project requirements, that's another in Dropbox, you'll see that there's some requirements for your 7 slides or something like that for PowerPoint. So as you start getting it done now and delegate those tasks to the people that can do them, then you'll be ready to go. One thing that I have to ask before we move on is, and it's a brief, just kind of a quick note on this is, please don't give me white pages for PowerPoint slides. Like, make it a little bit more interesting for me. It is a game kind of that you're making. You're kind of make it so that the PowerPoint slides are themed a little bit. Please don't choose a business theme like blues and grays, right? Make it so that it looks like a PowerPoint slide for a game. Like, you make your own theme, you add some images, you add your own border, and it should be the same thing for your GDD. Your GDD should be not just a white page. The template I gave you is okay for assignment 1, 2, 3. But I really recommend you change your GDD document so it's actually more themed for what you're doing, okay? So that way it's a little better. Also, for when you do your presentation to me, for your final presentation and your screencast, remember there's 2 parts to the presentation. 1 part screencast, 1 part actual physically presenting to me on the last day. I'm going to have a sign-up sheet next week that I'm going to put up on Slack and on eCentennial. Maybe I'll put it somewhere we can sign up. I expect all of you to sign up for your presentations, right? So your teams is what I'm saying. So you put your team name in there, who are the team members, and then your order. I'll kind of put up a slot, so it'll be first come, first serve. Once I put it up, you decide your order, and that's the order that you're presenting for the whole day, right? So I'll break it up into 2 parts, 2 sections. But for example, let's say you have members in section 1 that you want to actually present in the morning of that day, and you're really in section 2. It's okay, right? I mean, you guys decide which hour throughout the day you're doing it. We'll take a bit of time for lunch and breaks and stuff like that throughout the time, those 8 hours, because I want to make it as easy as possible for you. Now, if I get a lot of, I don't know, slots that are empty, so I'll put slots in there for a bunch of little slots. And if there's an empty time slot or something like that, then we'll obviously accelerate the people, right? So, I mean, if you're supposed to come in, please don't expect just to come in for your presentation and leave. That's not fair for the people that are the other people that are presenting, and we want to. It's part of your final exam, so you're all required to be here. If you're someone that's working alone, again, I really would ask that you adhere to your timelines. All right, which means that please don't try and ad lib. If you're thinking of you're the type of presenter that just adds, like kind of goes by the gut and like says whatever they want, that won't work for this presentation. We only have 10 minutes per group, right? So please kind of script out what you want to say. It makes it better for you, especially if you're a nervous person who doesn't present very well or who doesn't like presentations, right? I don't want to make this so it's like hell to your presentation. It should be somewhat enjoyable, right? And make it so I want you to think about when you present your game, it's like the best game in the world, okay? There's no better game than your game, all right? If you kind of are self-deprecating in your presentation, it's almost like, don't buy my game. I wasted my time. This is no good. I don't want to see that presentation. I want you to have a polished, kind of style as much as possible. And that's why it's great to screencast first. So screencast first, practice, put it up on YouTube. That's my recommendation because there's no codecs to be used. You can just use YouTube the way I'm doing it right now, right? Put it up on YouTube. You share your link with me. That's one of the requirements for your presentation, the link to your screencast. And so that way I can always look at it again later, right? Why? Because I talked about this before, and I'm talking about this a couple weeks out now because so there's no surprises for what's supposed to happen for your final exam, right? Again, your final exams for 20%, 10% for your screencast, 10% for your physical presentation here in the room, right, on that day, okay? Any questions around that stuff? Okay, let's talk about, side-by-side couch co-op and some stuff we do with cameras. So I'm going to set up another project up on GitHub. I did one for this morning. Well, ours is going to be slightly different this afternoon. I'm going to set up another, so I did lesson 12. I'm going to just call it lesson 12B, right? So COMP305, that's going to be lesson 12B. And lesson 12B is going to be all around, it's going to be all around this split screen stuff that we're going to do. So one little thing, one little feature, and I want to talk about some of the complexities around that. I'm going to set up a new project in Unity. Now, I've downloaded and installed Unity 5.5, right? I highly recommend you guys update to your Unity 5.5. And I'll tell you why. It gives you additional features. They've added a pile of more features and done some troubleshooting, deep bug fixing, if you will. And they've also added something else, a collaboration tool, Collab, that's built into Unity. I recommend taking a look at that. And we'll look at that a little bit today. So I'm going to make a new project. Notice it says on disk and in the cloud, right? My new project is going to be called COMP305, F2016, lesson 12B, right? There we go. Turning off analytics for this one, and click Create Project. Again, this is using 5.50 F3 is what I'm at right now as of this recording. Okay, typical project setup like we do before. I'm using like a side-by-side, a layout which is like a 2x3. That's what I'm using for those people who are watching. I'm going to create a couple of folders like we normally do really quickly. So I'll say a scripts folder. And so if you're there watching at home and you just want to follow me, let me do this first and then download my project to be ready to go. So script scenes, I'm going to set up a prefabs folder if we need one. Don't think we'll need one today, but I'll do it anyway. And I'll set up a textures folder, maybe a materials folder, maybe. That's it. So this is my basic project. I'm going to save my scene as, I did it in the morning a little differently. I'm going to save this as scene 1. We'll talk about, I'll make a few scenes here today. So there's scene 1. What I want to do here with scene 1 is I have a main camera and a directional light. What I want to include is some standard assets. If you go to Assets, Import Package, I want to import my characters. So I'm just going to include all of them this time. And I'm also going to include prototyping, right? Because we're going to use some stuff to prototype with. Prototyping is great because it gives you some basic building blocks, basic materials to use. I wouldn't recommend it for any kind of game. It's just for you to prototype and to do little experiments to see if things are working, right? So assets, again, import package, prototyping. Okay, I'm going to include that. And it puts it in the standard assets package. And I'm just going to rename the standard assets package. I like to do this, but you may choose not to imported assets. All right, so that's going to kind of put it up at the top there. So I have my packages, and all I'm going to do in my imported assets here is inside prototyping in my prefabs. I'm going to take a floor prototype and drop it into the scene. So it's going to be like one of these. Right, there's my floor. Notice that Unity highlights it with this nice orange color now. That's a new Unity 5.5 feature. When something's highlighted, it kind of glows, which is good. It's much thicker and easier to see that. I think they responded to some of the stuff that we've been talking to them about a long time. I'm also going to put in this first scene a character prototype. I'm going to put a first-person character and it's going to be a prefab. I'm not going to choose the FPS controller in this case. It causes us to have a few issues. I'm going to populate it with the rigid body FPS controller this time around. Okay, so I'm going to kind of put that in. I'm going to rename this to player. Maybe I'll call it, just to be on the safe side, player 1. Player 1 also has a main camera, but we're going to call it, player cam. That's what it is. We can also, if you really want to be a stickler, player 1 camera, right? That's what it has right now. And if you look at the player, if I use F to frame select, he's kind of half buried in here. I'm going to pull him out a little bit. And because I know I'm going to do couch co-op and all that kind of stuff, I'm going to give him a bit of a body. Right now he's kind of invisible, right? Which means I'm just going to kind of right-click here or create a new 3D object capsule. And I'm going to make it so that it is part of the player object, right? I'm also going to reset my object so it's kind of inside the object itself. The player object is centered, right? So when I move my player up now, the 3D object moves too, right? But it's pretty boring. It's kind of this gray, right? I want to make it nicer. So I'm going to go into inside the prototyping materials folder, and notice that there is navy grid, navy smooth. These are just colors that they've created and textures. They've got a pink. I'm going to use the pink one for player 2 when we do that. But for now, I'm going to duplicate the pink one. So right-click, and there's different ways of doing that. You can go to Edit, Duplicate, or you can press Control-D or Command-D on the Mac. And I will create another one called, instead of pink grid, we'll call it green grid. I don't have a green grid. And we'll just change the color from pink. And I'll just change this swatch, this turquoise swatch. Let's see if this is the right one. To this green. So this, this green grid. Here's my green grid, right? And I'm going to take my capsule from my player, right? And I'm going to remove my collider that comes with the capsule because it already has a collider that's built into the player controller. Let's get rid of that. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to take my material, which is the default material, and drag in my green grid. Now it's green player. Okay, well, that's it. So now I'm going to save this. This is the first scene. I'm going to save this, the scene. I'm going to save the project, and I'm going to close Unity. Quit Unity here. There we go. And in here, what I want to do is, here's 12B. I'm going to go CD with command line to 12B, right? And I'm going to say git init, right? Initialize git. I'm going to add a gitignore file. Always good to go with gitignore. Right? And I'm also going to use Nano or any other editor. You can use this to, I'm going to edit my gitignore file, and I'm going to add a builds. I'll reference the builds folder, so I don't want to do builds. Control X. And yes, I want to do that. It's going to be called gitignore. Good. So here's my gitignore file. So I'm going to say git add dot, right? So add all my my stuff that's in the project currently, and then git commit -m, and we'll say call this initial commit. Good. And now what I want to do again, like we always do, is take these last 2 lines really quickly. I mean, I can type them, but why? And paste and press enter, and everything should be up on GitHub in a few seconds. So the great thing is, this is where I want you to start from. So please download my project for people that are in the room, or if you're watching remotely, so we can move on from this. I'm going to build onto this project as opposed to, do things, kind of, something else. It's about 46 meg, primarily because of my prototypes that I downloaded and installed. Again, an hour of teaching, and then we're done. We don't have to worry about this anymore, this part. This is 12B. Okay, one thing to notice is when I go back in, I'll let you guys download that. When I go back into Unity, and I'm gonna select my project. Here's my project. On the top here, you have something called Collab. I'm using Unity 5.5. That's why I recommend you get it. And in Collab, I have the ability for me to have a collaborator, right? So I want to add a collaborator. Ali, you're going to be my collaborator for today. So I'm going to click Start Now. Let's try this out. And again, this is a 5.5 feature, right? And Ali, I want you to give me your email address for, there it is. Here's your email address for that you use with Unity. What's your email address that you use? Whatever you use with what's your user ID with Unity? You don't remember? Come on, who knows? Anyone here knows? Ty, you know what your Unity ID is, or Unity email address? One you use with Unity. Yeah. What is it? Yeah, come up here and tell me what it is. So I'll collaborate with you so you can see so people can see what it looks like. You can type it in if you want to. Okay, go ahead. Might be easier. Just go ahead. We have a student that's coming up and just putting in their email address. This is the one that you would use for Unity. All right. You can press invite. Now you'll get an invite. Notice it detected who you were, right? And notice that I have options. Is an owner or a manager or whatever, or a user. And what the great thing about this is you'll be able to collaborate. If you actually go there, if I actually go to my dashboard now for my Unity project, this is kind of a new thing we did earlier today as well. You can see that here's my users who's collaborating with me as an example, and you can actually look at my project. You can look at the analytics if it's available. I can enable analytics if I want, and so on. Right. So some really cool things with the Unity build. They've been really working towards with the latest version of Unity. Something to look at for sure in the future. I'm not going to talk too much about it right now, but I wanted to kind of show you what it looks like and how to set stuff up right with the free version of Unity that we're using. Okay. Going back to this, I've got my project. I'm going to just shut down the services tab right now because I'm not going to use it for the remainder of the time. And I've got my project. But the one thing I want to remind you of is I have two cameras right now, right? I have my main camera. Here's my main camera. And I have my player camera, right? Here's my player camera. I'm just going to shut down my main camera for a second. I'm not going to remove it from the scene. I'm just going to uncheck this, right? And when I do that, I only have one camera in play at this point. So if I look at my game, I have one camera, and if I play it right now, it looks like this, right? So I kind of walk around, and like we normally are used to, I have my player and it moves around, right? Nice. Now, what I want to do with this is I want to talk about a feature or a property of the cameras we never talked about before. And this is the property, viewport rect. Here's something that doesn't exist. We haven't talked about it so far. So under the viewport rect, you can see that we have X and Y coordinates as well as the width and the height. So I want you to imagine this. I want to make this appear as only half the width. This is what it's going to look like. So 0.5 the width. This is for the sorry, not for the main camera. Oops. For my player camera, it's going to be half the width, right? And then half the height. So 0.5, 0.5. And if I go to game, you see what I get. I get this. So here's my game, half the width and half the height of my camera, right? Again, if you look at the viewport rect in the main player cam, player one cam, right? You can see that I'm getting half the width and half the height. Now this is funny because it's starting off 0, 0 point is down here for the viewport rect. It's not up on the top anymore, right? So it's a different set of coordinates than we normally are dealing with. Okay, so what if I want my player one cam? I want to kind of add a canvas to the player one cam to kind of tell me what this camera is. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to kind of add a new UI item, right? So UI, I'm going to add a new text item in my UI. I'm going to call this player one, right? And my canvas will be the player one canvas, right? Player one canvas, right? So we know which one it is. Here's player one. Kind of didn't do that. I didn't enter there. And I want to change my text so it says player one. And I want to make it so it's much larger, let's say 30, which means I got to change the height of my text to something like 40. And let's make so that the color is yellow so we can see it. There we go. And I also want to make it so it's the top left corner of the screen, which I'm going to use Option or Alt to click on. You can see, oh, wait a minute, how come it's up here? I'll tell you why. Because my canvas is tied to my screen point, right? My world point, if you will. And I'll take a look. I'll show you what that means. Notice that it says my render mode for my canvas, where my canvas gets rendered, right, is screen space with an overlay, right? Well, this is my screen, and my overlay is right here, and even this is my camera. So it's not linked. But I want to link it, so I want each camera to have its own canvas, right? So I want to change from screen space overlay to screen space camera. And when I do that, and if I drag and drop my player cam to my screen space camera, I get this. So now my camera and my canvas are tied together. There is a problem with this, however, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So if I play the game now, and if I look down, well, what happened, right? Well, because my canvas is actually projecting in front of my camera now. It's tied to my camera, right? And it's projecting about 100 meters away. That means it's farther away than my plane is, and it's going underneath my plane, right? I don't want this. I want to only kind of project around 0.5 meters away, like right in front of my face kind of thing, right? And then when I play, if I do this, you can see that now it's here, right? Just to make it more interesting, we're going to add some other things to the player one text. I'm going to make it so that it is, instead of normal, I'll make it bold, right? And it's pretty big. I'll save my scene. Now, I have my player one, and I want to enable my camera to be on the top left. Okay, so let's enable the camera. Let's make the width 0.5 and the height 0.5 for my camera. And 0, 0 means the bottom left. I want to make it the top left. What do I change to make it the top left, and what do I change it to? What do you think? Going with this formula. Half the width and half the height, and I want to make it the top left corner of my screen, my main camera. What do I change in my X and Y? What would I put? The Y would be what? 0.5, right? So 0.5, if I did that, and I went to game, you can see now that my camera, my main camera is here, and it always looks at my, in this direction. If I play now, it's not going to move, right? See how it doesn't move? I can move my guy, my camera stays the same. It's like a little mini map, right? A different view of what my character is doing. I can jump around, and nice and easy. Okay, so this is what this does. Let's make a little canvas for my camera. So I'm going to just copy the canvas. So I'm going to duplicate, so Control or Command D to duplicate the canvas. And we'll call this one here, we'll say top left canvas, top left, like this, top left canvas, so we know which one it is. And instead of my main camera being my main camera, I'll call this the top left camera. Top left camera. Right? And I have a bunch of canvases now, player canvas, and you know, I'm probably going to have other cameras too. I have 2 cameras. I'm probably going to have more cameras in here. Let's, for our top left canvas, let's call this the canvas text. Canvas text. Right? There it is, the canvas text. And this canvas text, or the cam text, if you will, probably might be a better word to say, cam text. My top left camera is going to say top left, just so that we know which one it is. So there's top left. And what I also want to do is, remember, with the canvas itself, we can't use player one camera for this. We need to use the top left camera for this. I'm just going to drag and drop this one. So now you see top left in there, right? Nice and easy. Makes sense? Let's make more, right? So what I want to do is I want to make some objects. So I want to kind of make an object and canvas kind of group, right? So we'll kind of make a new empty object, and we'll say, and it's got to be over here. And so in the main, without anything else, I'll kind of zero it out, so there's no 0, 0, 0 point, and we'll call this the And I kind of did it differently this morning, but I'll probably call it the camera, canvas groups, right? One camera canvas group, right? And I'll take the camera, and I'll take the canvas related to it, and I'll put it in there. And now that I've got that, I'll change this to the top left camera canvas group, right? And now I can see I can kind of hide those, right? But I can also duplicate them. And I want to make two more. I want to make top right and bottom right. So duplicate, duplicate, all right? And this will be the top right. And this will be the bottom right. And we'll just change this name so that it doesn't look at the ones and the bottom. And I can make it so that there's 4 cameras that kind of look at all the stuff that I wanted to look at, right? And we'll call cam text is OK. And I'll do the same thing for the bottom right canvas. Really some interesting changes really quickly. And then we'll talk about this in a second. OK, good. So bottom right canvas, bottom right camera, this whole group. But they're all appearing here. They're all layered on top of each other. So I want the top right camera itself. So, OK, I want to move it to the right now. What's the rect coordinates for the top right? So 0.5. And on this side, this has got to say top right, right? You can see how this works, right? Top right. OK. And this is the bottom right. So I'm going to go to the bottom right. And the same thing now for the bottom right camera. What is it going to be? So this will be 0.5. And this one will be 0. Right? So this is the bottom right. Nice and easy. Right? And again, this will say bottom right. Here we go. And if it's not long enough, because it's kind of long, we'll make this, I don't know, 200. And we have to make it so that we pull it across a little bit more so it kind of fits. There we go. Right? Now they all look at the object the same way. Let's make it more interesting. And the cameras, so the cameras are that are in here in these groups, right? So this is the one camera. I want to kind of add some kind of way of detecting where the camera is. So I'm going to use this little label that I can add in by clicking on this little button over here. So we'll make this little label. So the top camera, this will be this little label, and the same thing with the other one. They're all using a label now as opposed to nothing. And now that I have labels for the cameras, if I zoom out, what I can do is I can talk to the top left camera group, and we'll move it to this side. And we'll say the top right camera group will, I want to hover this whole thing, right? The whole thing is going to be hovered or rotated, right? So that the camera looks down. And so we'll kind of, I want to kind of rotate it on the X so it looks like 90 degrees. That kind of weird. What happened there, right? Undo. I meant the camera will be rotated across the axis 90 degrees. There you go. And we'll pull it back up from that perspective. We'll pull it up so it kind of looks from a top-down perspective, almost like a bird's eye view or a mini map, if you will. Right? We'll also zero out the this part so it's kind of thing. And 60 might be too big. Maybe we'll make it so it's, I don't know, 60. There we go. No, I meant 60. So that's that camera, and this camera we'll pull this whole one to this side over here, and we'll rotate the camera around the other way. So make it kind of look it over this way. Maybe 180 minus 180, maybe. There we go. And there's also very few things that are on this plane, so to speak. So again, if you look at camera, this is bottom right. This is the top right camera. This is the top left camera, which kind of looks at things in this way, right? So it's looking this way. The other one's looking this way at the other camera. And so there's some differences. Let's put some more prototypes on the scene so we can give a little bit of sense of more perspective, because it's just a big plane. That's what we have here right now. So I'm going to go to prefabs, and you see I also have some cube prototypes, and I also have a house prototype. Let's add the house in there. Okay, it's too big. So we'll shrink it down. I'll shrink it down, make it like that, and we'll put the house on the ground there, approximately like that, and do one of those. There's a house on the corner, and we'll add in a pillar prototype over here, and maybe we'll add in some kind of other things like a steps prototype over here. Let's color these a little differently, so we'll use some of the materials. And you can see that the materials that I'm using for this one is this navy grid material. I'm just going to choose this yellow material for this one, so we can make it a little differently. And I'll use the house that belongs to the character. So let's make a green grid for the house a little differently. It'll make this a pink pillar, right? So that it just, we have a few differences here. So it's not totally boring. All right, there. And now when we play, we see the following. So here I am, the bottom is the player. I can run, and you can see that I can move in different places. You can see the top-down view, and you can also see my camera spin around. I can go over on the ramp, see if I can climb the ramp. Right, so pretty good. Fall off the ramp a little bit, and it's pretty cool, right? Even try and jump on the ramp, can't really get that high. But I can speed away, and you can see me in different cameras and how they come across, the house, whatever, where I am on different views. Yeah. So multiple cameras, being used to see this. So it's not like the minimap. Okay, minimap is an overlay that's projected or rendered inside of an image that's inside of a canvas. This is actual 4 cameras that are being used here to render the images. Okay. Why would you want to do this? Well, imagine if I had 4-player co-op, right? Each player could have a corner, right? Which actually, I think that's what Minecraft does, right? If you actually have 4 players. No, they can do 4 players. Yeah, you can do 4 players. And you can also do the other way around. So this is the first one. So this is like 4 cameras being used for different reasons. Okay, we'll save this one. So save. Yeah, I'm going to copy this scene. Everyone understand the whole idea of the camera, the view rect, which is basically the bottom left-hand corner. Or one thing we have to do, we have to change, by the way, because I'm getting these errors for the audio listeners. Each camera is embedded with an audio listener. It comes with an audio listener component. You can just uncheck it. You don't have to remove it, right? As long as it doesn't have it active audio listener, then it won't give you the error, right? Because the only audio listener you really need is your character, right? And if I was to run this thing now, you'll see that that error goes away, right? So there's no more error on the audio listener side. So I'll save that scene. What I want to do now is I want to duplicate the scene. I don't want to kind of reinvent the wheel here. So here's when I go to my scenes. There's my scene 1. I'm just going to duplicate the scene, right? Here's scene 2, right? And I'm going to double click on this scene to bring up scene 2 for a second. So here's scene 2. Looks like scene 1. I'm going to get rid of the canvas groups this time around. Let's get rid of them. Actually, I'll get rid of all of them except for the bottom one. These 2. Okay, get rid of this one. So what I could also do with this scene here, right, is, remember, here's my game scene right now. I have my player. I want to put my player on the top, and my bottom I want to use as a UI. Okay, that's the other thing I can do. So with cameras, I'm trying to give you some ideas of what to do with your games, make it more interesting. Okay, so my player 1, I'm going to look at my player 1 cam. You can see that I have a width of 0.5 and a height of 0.5. I'm going to give him a width of 1 this time, but a height of only 0.9. I'm also going to move him up by about 0.1, right? We can move up a little bit. And then with my other camera on my, this one, right? This camera group, the bottom right, it'll be the bottom. I'll call this thing the bottom canvas group. So bottom camera canvas group, right? Because that's what this is going to be. Bottom camera and the bottom canvas. So what can you do with this one? Well, the bottom camera isn't going to be 0.5, 0.5, it's going to be 0. And this width is going to be 1. But the height is only going to be 0.1. Oh, sorry, 0.1. Like that. And I have a couple of items in here. I have my cam text. This time I'll change this stuff to make it more realistic. So maybe I'll have my health in there. I'll call it health. And just to show you what it looks like on the game side. There it is, what it looks like. And I'll duplicate this. So duplicate. And I'll call this armor, let's say. And here's the armor for the guy, the girl who's playing. And what I'll do is I'll move this one over so it'll be on the other side. Let me make armor up here, over here, let's say. And maybe I want you to imagine this isn't just words, this is just icons or something. Some kind of user interface that I'm going to use for the player's armor and health, right? And the background doesn't make any sense, so I'm going to get rid of it with the camera. So I'm going to look at my bottom camera. I don't care about the skybox anymore. And I'll make the solid color black, as an example. And you know what? I don't care about seeing anything like this. So if I look at the actual camera with the bottom canvas group, so focus in on that, it's right here looking at my scene, and I'm going to look at it the other way around. So I'm going to rotate the bottom camera back to 0, so it doesn't see anything. I'm going to pull it out, the whole bottom camera group, so it kind of looks over here. And now you can see that the game, I can have my own user interface that the player cannot see. But you have to be careful. You should probably put it so that the camera, if I play the game, there's no chance that I can ever see the camera or anything else. See, I can't see anything, even if I walk over here. Now the top part is my play area, and the bottom part is my user interface. Okay, and there's no way that the two can see each other because, right? Now, what's the difference between this and an overlay? This one has nothing to do with my canvas. My canvas on my player, this overlay that I have here on my player object right here is totally different than this one. This can be actually buttons. You can make it so it's another kind of user interface altogether, a panel of some kind, something that, because remember, my screen physically starts here. There is nothing outside of this screen for the player. Here, this is just, I can actually click on this as another interface. It's almost like a minor options menu or some kind of health bar or other kind of information that pops up here that does not get overlaid on the player, right? So it's not an overlay. You can also do it on the side or a combination of the side and the bottom.
So let's say you want to make an overlay. You just do what we did with the gun and make it so that way.
Yes, you can do that too. Yes, absolutely. You can do all kinds of stuff with your multiple cameras as opposed to using one camera with an overlay. Because this can solve some problems, guys and girls, right? Like, for example, sometimes what happens is when we do this kind of overlay, an overlay causes issues where I can separate my user interfaces in different quadrants of my screen to give myself more options, okay? All right, so this is option 2. Option 2. Let's go for the final option, which can take the rest of our time from a teaching perspective. That's why I've left it to the end. So I'm going to go to scene 1 again. I'm going to duplicate my scene to make a scene 3. Go to scene 3. And then I'll upload to GitHub after I'm done all this stuff. You okay? You got your hand up, or you just you're good? Okay. So I'm on scene 3 here, and I don't care about any of these canvas groups anymore. So all this can go. So delete. But now what I want to do is I want to make it split screen. Now, I want to ask you a question. When you do a 2-player co-op or couch co-op, how is the split screen divided? Is it left-right, or is it top-bottom? Top-bottom, typically. But you could have right-left, depending if that's what you're comfortable with. Borderlands allows you to do both, as an example.
I always find it very difficult because you're used to looking at this type of box. So
right.
When it switches to that,
yeah.
you still perceive the whole screen.
You want to look at both sides. The thing is,
it's actually kind of the way that our eyes see something.
It really works well if you do a up and down one. It really works well if you have a big screen. If you have like a large 60-inch monitor, like one of these, if I took half the screen for one player and you sat over there and I was on this side, then it would be okay, right? But if you make it this way, that's most common because I'm on the top and you're on the bottom or whatever it's going to be. You can separate yourself from that.
And whatever you do, never make it down.
Yeah. Yeah.
One of the Lego games,
Dynamic?
As you run by each other, you would switch.
No.
Yeah,
Oh, that's
it
terrible.
works.
Yeah. We don't make dynamic cameras with split screen. All right, so I'm going to put one on the top and one on the bottom, right? So let's fix that. So my player one, here's my player one cam. Again, it's half the width, so we'll make it the full width, and we'll make it instead of the height is half, but we want to put it up to the top, so 0.5. There's my camera on the top, nice and easy, right? Now what we're going to do is we're going to do the same thing, right? But we're going to put player two on the bottom, right? Now, notice that I have my player one canvas, and I'm going to have my player two canvas. Guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to create a player one group, right? So I'm going to create a new, create empty over here, and we're going to reset everything so it's nothing. I'm going to call this the player one. I might even just call it player one group. And the reason why I want to do this is because it saves me some trouble. I meant to do this in my player one group, and I meant to do this in my player one group. There we go. Couldn't do it together. Okay, so now that I've got my player one group, I can duplicate the whole group, right? And I get my canvas and everything duplicated too. So duplicate, and now I have my player two group. Now this is where we're going to do some of our work in player two. Player one is pretty much set, right? But player two, we're going to have to do some work in the coding side as well. Player two canvas. Oh, and we'll change this to player two. Just so that for the naming convention, it's all the same. Being a little bit of a stickler there, I could have just kept it the same. Here's player two. And of course, what I want to do is my camera for player two, right? My player two cam, which is important for me to name properly, right? Player two cam, and this is player one cam. See that? My player two cam, I definitely want it to be 1 and 0.5 height, but I want it to start off at 0, right? So there's my 0. That's an easy. So player one, player two. In my player two cam, I also don't want to have an audio listener because I can only have one audio listener at a time. So click that. Now, if I play it the way it is, this is what I get. It's not really complete, right? Both move at the same time, right? Even though I have two different objects, right? They're right on top of each other, number one, and they move at the same time. If I look at the scene, as an example, if I kind of pop in there to the scene, here's my player two group. I want to move my player two group away from my player one, so there's actual separate objects, right? And I want to color my player two capsule. So instead of it being green grid, I want to make it so it's pink grid, like we did before. So for materials, get my pink grid and kind of pull it over there. There we go. Now, if I do this, right, left and right, I can see my player. And if I look to the right, I can see my other player. They're both in the scene. But if I move, then both move at the same time and both jump at the same time. And it doesn't make any sense because I have one set of controls, right? I only have one mouse and I have one keyboard. Now, the right thing to do, if you guys want to do this, and I'm showing you this today because I want to give you an option for your build because you guys are kind of at the beginning. So here's what I want you to do. If you choose to use couch co-op as an option, right? So you can turn it off or on. You're actually making, instead of 3 levels, you would be making 6 levels. 3 levels that are single player and 3 levels that are couch co-op, right? Like, you know, they kind of play against each other, right? However, I will give you the option if you want to use couch co-op to create 4 levels, 2 for single player. So level 1, level 2 only, and level 1, level 2 that use couch co-op, right? So now you have 4 levels instead of 3, but you're duplicating, right? So it's not as difficult. Now the second levels have to have the ability to kind of have a, I don't know, player on player combat, maybe cooperative play, some kind of other features to those levels that you would normally have, right? So when you enable in your menu, you'd say, what kind of game do you want to play? Single player, couch co-op. When you click couch co-op, it plays the couch co-op level 1, not the single player level 1, okay? So I'll give you the option if you want to do that, just to give you to make your game a little different than everyone else's, because everyone's kind of making the same kind of games, right? Now, here are the difficulties with this. In real life, if you're going to do this, please use a game controller, like an Xbox controller. And you can set up controls for Xbox controllers separately. I didn't bring my Xbox controller today. I'm going to make it so that Alex and I are going to play on my computer. He's going to play on one side, and I'm going to play on the other side, right? Now, if that's the case, I have to disable some controls from my control, right? From my player 2. Now, player 1 and player 2 are separate items. They're separate objects, right? However, they're being controlled by the same script. If I look at the player 1 object, it has something called a rigid body first player person controller script, right? And if I was to edit this, edit my script, I can see that I have a bunch of stuff that's been hard-coded. Example would be, I have my jump, that's hard-coded, string, right? As so is my horizontal and vertical strings here when I get input. I want to make these so that they are not hard-coded, that they are dynamic, right? Now, notice that there's a couple of other things they do in the scripts. Whenever I look at somebody else's scripts, I'm always like critical. I'm like, would I have done it that way? I don't know. But these guys, this is the guys from Unity that did this, right? So one of the things they did is put a class inside of another class, which is totally legit. You can do that. Not sure I would do it this way, but it's totally doable, especially from a quick and dirty kind of way of doing it. This is a good way of doing it. One thing is when you serialize a class, it means that it's available throughout the entire code, right? If I make it serializable. And now because this serializable class, this move settings, is inside of my rigid body first person controller, this is going to turn out to be a little down arrow in the my interface, my inspector. Notice that here's move settings. That's the class move settings, and all the public variables are listed here, right? And they're underneath this heading, movement settings or whatever, right? Same thing with other things. If you kind of scroll down here, you can see that I have my advanced settings here. And wait, where's my mouse settings? I don't see it. How come it's not here? Thing is, it does get instantiated here. And what I want you to also know is that as soon as I attach a script, I can do it in a couple ways. One, through by attaching this thing. Notice that this require component, what it does is it actually attaches a rigid body, and it attaches a capsule collider, and it does this dynamically. As soon as I run this script, it just attaches those two components. You can do that within the script itself. If I put require component, that's something new, right? Well, at the same time, I can do the same thing with scripts, right? I can actually attach the mouse look script in the same way, right? So it's actually combined, right, within this script itself. So here's my mouse look. Notice how I'm doing that, mouse look. And if I instantiate a new object of type mouse look, right, and notice how it's being done, I'm instantiating an object of new movement settings. Here's mouse look, and here's advanced settings. And I'm doing that in order. Here's the camera, and all of these things that are being done, because they're system serializable in here, they're actually creating, in this way, all the objects in order. So that's why they're appearing like this in the inspector. So I want to include another set of settings that only talk about my my input, right? So I could create, I did this differently in the first class, but I could create a serializable class, right, that has, it's all about input. Mouse X and mouse Y and so on, right? How do I do that? Remember, all these little classes are just, sometimes they're just properties like this. This is an example of a serializable class, right? So I want to do the same thing. I want to kind of, in between here, I want to create a new serializable class. So I kind of type serializable. And I'm going to make a public class that I'm going to put in that's called input settings. My input settings class, right? And inside my input settings class, I can do this properly. There we go. I want to have a few public properties. One of them is going to be a public, again, I want you to see this, a public string, which is called jump, which is going to have a default of jump. Public string that's going to be, we're going to be type horizontal axis, which is going to be just called horizontal. And the public string, which is vertical axis, which is going to be just called vertical. So I'm modifying their script a little bit, right? And this system serializable class, because I made it serializable, it's going to be called input settings. And if you look at back to the inspector, you can see that if I kind of click away and click back to my player, I have now my movement settings and my mouse look, but where's my input settings? Well, I have to instantiate an object of this type of class, and I got to do it in the same place where they do theirs. So right here. So I'm going to do it right after mouse look. I'll say public, actually, and probably the good thing to do is probably up here before mouse look. Underneath the cam, I'll probably say public, input settings. Okay, we'll call it input settings is equal to a new input settings object. And once I've done that and I go back and I kind of click away and click back to my player, you can see now that I have input settings right here. Right? So it's actually it's embedded in my inspector nicely. Jump, horizontal, and vertical, right? We're going to add to that in a bit. Now, if that's true, can I replace jump by just using jump? Can I do that? Can I do something like jump? Right? No, right? Because I have to refer to my input settings jump, right? Now, input settings is the type of object, right? I have a new object of type input settings. So down inside my get button, I have to put something like input settings, because that is an object, input settings itself, dot jump. And that's going to be the jump string from the input settings class. Okay, let's do that again. Go down here. And here's my horizontal. I want to kind of do the same thing. I want to say input settings dot horizontal, horizontal axis. And same thing with input settings vertical axis. We're going to add to that input settings class again and again. Okay, cool. So some really cool things there. And you can see that now, if everything works well, that I've replaced my jump horizontal and vertical with my jump horizontal axis and vertical axis. If I play now, I should still have no errors and be able to move around, right? So that's how I test it. I test it to make sure that everything's exactly the same. Okay, that's part one. I want to split. I want to stop hard coding my strings, and I want to give myself the ability to have other inputs instead of these standard inputs. But I need the other inputs, so let's create them. So to do that, I got to go to Edit. I'm going to go to Project Settings, Input. And notice that under the axis, it's an axis array. I have many axes, right? And I have horizontal and vertical. So right now, my horizontal axis is my left and right arrow keys plus my A and D buttons. Well, I want to use my arrow keys, right, for looking up and down, right, with my mouse. Right? That's what I want to do with my right button, my right player, my player 2. So I don't want to use these buttons anymore, right? I only want to have A and D, right, for my player 1. This is my player 1 axis, right? Okay, good. And my vertical axis also uses my arrows down and up. I don't want to use them either. Just want to get rid of those. I'm kind of removing some of those options. And now what I can do is I can hover over an axis like this, right-click, and go duplicate array element. So I can create something called horizontal 2, right? And I'll come back to this, and I'll do the same thing with my vertical, right? So now I call this vertical 2, and I put them together, by the way, just because they're easier for me to see. Everyone does it kind of differently. So now instead of A and D, I want to use IJKL, right, on my keyboard for my right player, on my player 2, right, as an example. So I would be in the horizontal, or L would be the positive button, right? And K would be the negative button, or sorry, J would be the negative button going this way, left to the left, right? So that's the horizontal axis. And the same thing goes with vertical. My vertical axis normally is S and W. S would be the negative. My negative would actually be K, and my positive would be I. So IJKL, basically for movement, okay? Okay, I also want to do the same thing for my jump. My jump axis right now is using the space bar, right? So here's my jump. Well, that's the other jump. There's 2 jumps, right? But jump, notice it uses the positive button is joystick button 3, right? Is there another jump? I think there was. Yeah, they're over here. Yeah, that's the other option. Here's the other jump here. It uses space. I want to keep using space for the left, the player 1, But for player 2, I want to create a jump 2. Oh, jump 2. And I can't use space anymore. And I have to think about my keyboard layout. I got IJKL and my arrow keys. You know what? Probably a good jump button would be the /. So something like / for the positive button. Right? So that's my jump 2. Okay, cool. I've modified my axes. Now I got to modify my script for player 2 only. So I'm going to click on player 2. I'm going to go down to my script where I have my input and change these to jump 2, horizontal 2, vertical 2. When I do that and play, now, oh man, my mouse still works. My mouse still works, but if I look at so it's my player 1, right? If I look to the right, all right, look to the right, and player 2 is looking at the player 1, right? And if I kind of move this with my buttons, so if I kind of use my buttons to move, there we go. So, right? These kind of look okay. This is for my player 1, right? I can still do this for both players, and I can still jump by itself. Now, what we should have is, oh yeah, that'd be nice if we actually set up everything properly. For vertical and the other one, I got to go back to that one for a second. Remember, what I want to do is IJKL, right? So if I play this again, I should have movement with IJKL that's totally separate, right? On the bottom, so it's IJKL. Now if I look, I can see that it's moving completely separate than the other one. So I can kind of move them both at the same time, right? So kind of, you know, make it move so that they're totally independent of each other, right? Right? Totally different, both player 1 and player 2. The mouse is an issue. So this is where it becomes a little funky. I don't have a second mouse. So I'm going to use my arrow keys for my mouse movement, okay? So now this presents some issues, all right? So let's go back to Edit. I'm going to go to Project Settings, Input. And if you look at that, I have something called Mouse X and Mouse Y. I'm going to modify Mouse X and Mouse Y because I'm going to create Mouse X2 and Mouse Y2, just we did before. So there's the second one. And there's Mouse X2. And there's Mouse Y2. There we go. Now, here's the thing. I can't use mouse movement. Notice these are the types of axis. Mouse movement and on the x-axis. And then what I want to really do is change this to keyboard for X2. But I can't have a gravity of 0. A gravity means, when it comes to input, it means is there any resistance? If I have a gravity of 0 with a key, as soon as I hit that key, it's going to keep doing that thing over and over again. It's not going to stop, ever. It's going to keep on giving me input for that key the first time I touched it. So I want to have a gravity of about 1,000. And I also want to have a sensitivity of about 1,000. So it's really, really sensitive, just like normal keys. And I want to put a dead space, so when it comes dead, about 0.0, I think it's 0.001. And the way to check that is if you look at a fire button, it tells you this exact thing. It's almost like a button. That's what I'm planning, right? That's what mouse X2 looks like. And I'll do the same thing for mouse Y2. So again, it'll be about gravity about 1,000. I'm going to use the dead space as 0.001, and my sensitivity is about 1,000. Again, just going with their template. And instead of mouse movement, we're going to go to keyboard or joystick, right? Now, the buttons are really important. So X on the x-axis, that's the X movement. That's right and left, right? X and Y. That's across the x-axis, right? Y-axis is up and down, right? So to change that, from a positive button perspective, that means that for me to go up, I want to have the up button. And for me to go down, I want to have the down button, right? Up and down, okay? And for the mouse Y2, if I want to go to the right, I want to have that's the positive button. And for the left is the negative button. Okay? There we go. Now, if I did this correctly, that means that now, what did I do? Oh, yeah. I did it correctly, but I didn't do anything with code. Let's take a look at the player 2 code. Okay, so player 2's got an issue, right? I've got my input settings here, and I need to add a couple more, right? One is mouse X and mouse Y. I don't have that, so let's go back to the code. Yeah, but why? I mean, I can do it here, and I can change mouse look later, right? So an example of this would be in my I created this class, right? So here's my input settings. I want to have something called a public string that's mouse x, and that's going to be equal to mouse x, right? And public string that is mouse y, which is equal to, by default, to mouse y. That's we're just setting up the defaults. There we go. And what I want to do is inside, it can't be in this class, right? Remember, it's system serializable, so anything I do here is available in all classes, right? You got to be careful about this, though. So that's nice, Tom. I love it. But how does this work within my class? Now, the funny thing about this, if I did it this way, it may have some weird effects. Let's go back to the all scripts. Remember that the mouse class itself, the mouse look, is a big class. It's got its own little class here. And if I double click on this class, it's system serializable. Here's my mouse X and mouse Y and all that, right? But here's where it is. Now, if I start typing something like this, right? Input settings. I don't have any input settings here because it doesn't exist, right? So the only way I could do that, just putting it out there to you guys, is I have to instantiate another object of type input settings in here, right? And the way, of course, to do that is inside my start function or init function, just like I did here. So here, I instantiated this stuff at the top of my class. These are just serializable classes. So here at the top of my class for the mouse look, I got to do the same thing. And I got to make it public. So I'm going to do something like this, public, right? And it's going to be input settings, right? Now, I want you to look at something, right? Input settings is nice, but because I have it inside this controller right here, input settings, I don't have it available here. The only way that it can be available across everything is if my input settings class was attached to some other object, like a game controller. And then it would be available to me anytime I looked at it, right? Like a separate object. So, nice idea, Tom. Can't use. If that's the case, and it'd be nice for me to do it, if I had included my mouse look inside of this class, yes, it would be totally possible, right? But because my mouse look is a separate object, the only way that that's happening is if I have it in some, kind of do it in some other way. So I might as well just do something like this. I want to create an area that says my header for my mouse look, again, would be input settings, right? So input settings, my header. We've done headers before, right? Where my public string mouse X is equal to mouse X, and my public string mouse Y is equal to mouse Y. There we go. Okay. Now that I have this, I can go down to where I have mouse X and mouse Y and replace them by mouse X and mouse Y. And when you look at back to Unity, if you look at the code now for player 2, you can see that inside my movement settings, inside my mouse look, I have input settings for mouse X and mouse Y, which I can just attach to mouse X2 and mouse Y2. And again, just to kind of see that, I can go into Edit and Input Settings, and you can see that there's mouse X2 and mouse Y2 we created, right? That's how we did that. And so now I've switched my mouse controls for my player 2, but only for my player 2, right? Sorry, I did that in play mode. So now when I play, in my player 2, I can look up. Oh, I kind of reversed them. I would do that. Let's try to fix that. Mouse X. Oh yeah, I totally reversed them. I totally messed that up. So I go File. That's okay. We'll fix it. So live. This is these live sessions kind of thing that happens. It's mouse X2 is actually the x-axis. I don't know what I was thinking. This would be the negative button would be, or the negative button would be left. Sorry. pause button right. That'll be okay. I was thinking about it the other way around. And Y2 would be the positive button would be up and down. Right? Sorry. And so what I mean is, so if I do this, then I can see up and down, right? And then left and right. And then, of course, I can do up and down and left and right separately. Okay, let's go. Come over. You're going to play one side, and you're going to chase me. I'm going to play the other side. And so Alex, I know Alex, sorry, it's a small keyboard. You're over here. You're WASD with the mouse and the space bar, and I'm this part over here. And then, okay, I'm going to try and get away from you because I'm going to try and go here and see if you can chase me. And I'm going to kind of turn around. Yeah. Okay, I fell. There I go. But you can see it's totally different thing. No, why'd you fall? Okay. But anyways, the point is that Alex controlled one side and I control the other side, and we have kind of a couch co-op or a player versus player, right? With no networking. Okay. And that's what I want to represent. So you can create kind of a side-by-side play with 2 or more players if you want to. I recommend only 2. And if you're going to do this, I'd ask you to please include some kind of controller, like an Xbox controller. Now, there are some default Xbox controller settings, and if you were to look it up, if I said Xbox controller settings, I'm sorry, for Unity, right? They actually give you some. They'll give you some axes right here. I'll give you all the defaults right here for axes for the Mac, for Linux, and so on, and how to set up the axes for your buttons and for your Xbox and everything else. I highly recommend looking at this thing here. It gives you everything you need to set up your Xbox controller and to make sure it works. Again, if you're going to do 2-player couch co-op, 1 player for me, just for this project, should be the keyboard and mouse. And the other player, because I only have 1 Xbox controller at home, should be the Xbox controller, right? So that way you can play, player versus Xbox controller, and it'd be probably realistic, right? Okay. And that's it for today's lesson. I'm only talking about the split screen and the ability for you to use split screen to do different effects. Let me just save the scene here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to save the project again and kind of quit Unity. And let's put it up on GitHub for everybody. So I'm going to kind of clear the screen. And we'll say git add dot, and we'll git commit -m, and we'll say added split screen. Go, and then git push origin master, and we're good to go. One little quick and dirty kind of thing. So you have everything I have, all the scenes, scene 1, 2, 3. They're all up on GitHub if you want to check it out. Again, if you were just to reiterate, if you want to use only 2 levels, level 1, level 2, because it's easier for you, or if you're working alone, it might be a better alternative than trying to make 3 levels. Make 2 levels and make 1 level couch co-op, right? And I would accept that as an alternate for your final project, okay? But remember, make couch co-op with an Xbox controller, and a mouse and keyboard for me. Also, one thing we talked about earlier in the first section was, hey, Tom, what kind of builds should I do? Well, typical build is WebGL, right? But if you really want to be helpful to me, you could also make if you really wanted to, a Mac build, right? Because then it'll be easier for me to launch my Mac. But WebGL build is all you need to do, and I would recommend you format your project for your Mac build. For WebGL build, okay? Any other questions before we end for today? And then next week, like I said, we'll talk about something called object pools. And if I was to look up what that is as a preview, if I look up a Unity object pools, object pooling, that's what I'm going to be looking at. They actually have a whole topic on this that I'll be following. And that's what we're going to be talking about next week, object pooling, and how that's going to help us when it comes to managing our resources and creating and destroying objects a lot more effectively than the way we're doing it today, okay? So we'll end today, and then I'm going to go around, I'm going to take a short break, and when I come back, I'm going to start looking at all your projects in class, and it'll be for the remainder of the day, it'll be just a work period.